The State Palace Theater in New Orleans was notorious for overnight rave parties, where the drug ecstasy was openly available. Hospitals were overwhelmed with overdose victims.
On a typical night, ecstasy use or ecstasy overdoses would range anywhere from 2 patients to 6 or 8.
Today, the manager and 2 promoters of the club were indicted for simply knowingly and intentionally making the building available for the purpose of unlawfully distributing and using controlled substances.
This is one of the most unconscionable drug offenses that I've ever seen.
The use of ecstasy has exploded in recent years. The Drug Enforcement Administration estimates 2 million tablets are smuggled into the U.S. every week, mostly from the Netherlands. The drug is particularly popular among middle-class teenagers and young adults. It induces an intense euphoric effect and lowers inhibitions, but it can also cause severe dehydration and sometimes death.
We want to educate the public and our friends in law enforcement that how they can go about stopping these rave parties that are really there just for drugs.
Stopping the rave party and getting the distributors of ecstasy. The alleged head of a $100 million smuggling ring, mobster Sammy the Bull Gravano, was arraigned just yesterday. Bill Redeker, ABC News, New York.
Former Mafia hitman and mob turncoat Salvatore Gravano found a new line of work, but it too is illegal. Gravano was arrested Thursday in Phoenix on drug charges, and authorities say it was a family affair. Randall Pinkston reports.
Federal authorities once called Sammy the Bull Gravano the most important mob turncoat in U.S. history. But to Arizona prosecutors, he's a common drug lord.
I'm in the community, I'm part of the community.
Police say Gravano, his wife, daughter, and son allegedly distributed 20 to 30,000 ecstasy pills throughout the state. Author and mob expert Jerry Capisi says the involvement of Gravano's family is a surprise.
He has publicly talked about John Gotti bringing his son into the crime family as one of the things that he would never have done.
In my history of crime, this is a minor thing.
His history of crime was closely tied to the Teflon Don, John Gotti, who beat 3 federal prosecutions until Gravano turned informant. Gotti was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. In exchange, federal authorities gave Gravano a new identity and a new start in business. But Arizona officials allege it was the drug business that gave Gravano luxury cars, a boat, and cash, all of it seized after his arrest. If he's convicted, Gravano faces 12 years in prison, and the turncoat who sent so many mobsters to jail could soon be joining them. Randall Pinkston, CBS News, New York.
Stand by, coming out of the premises towards his vehicle.
It's almost the end of a 3-month-long operation. All the intelligence and surveillance work has led to this North London drugs factory. The targets are the manufacturing chemist and the man who set up the factory, the drugs principal, who takes refuge in a nearby garage where he's arrested and taken away for questioning. These officers from the newly formed Southeast Regional Crime Squad are searching for ecstasy tablets. These sell at up to £25 a time. Inside the factory, hidden behind a partition, the laboratory. This factory has produced 200,000 tablets in the last 48 hours. In a makeshift but effective soundproofed room, a pill-making machine which was subcontracted to make drugs for a well-known South London drugs gang consortium. The chemist was arrested. He's been on the run since escaping from prison some months ago. The drugs officers also found chemicals and powders. They estimate some £15 million worth of illegal tablets has been prevented from reaching the streets. This insignificant-looking factory, say police, if it had gone unchecked, could have flooded Britain with ecstasy.
There is one side to Amsterdam the tourist guides don't mention, the tidal wave of ecstasy which is threatening to engulf this city. For years, the Dutch authorities have been known for their pragmatic approach to cannabis, still openly on sale in the coffee shops around the city. Now they are faced with a generation who are turning on to something far different. Ecstasy is the fastest-selling drug in Holland, outstripping by far anything else. At house parties and nightclubs, voluntary workers offer leaflets advising people not against taking ecstasy, but giving details and safe dosages. In a private garage in Veldhoven, police have discovered an ecstasy-making laboratory for turning powder into pills. One man is arrested and the equipment confiscated. But the drug is getting through from ports like Rotterdam straight to Britain. Over 90% of ecstasy such as this seized coming into Britain comes from Holland. At a nightclub in Widnes, bouncers search people coming in for drugs. But the management know that however diligent their efforts, ecstasy is being used here. Doctors at the National Poisons Unit say ecstasy is extremely harmful and believe it can cause brain damage or death. Barry and Angela Jones know exactly what the dangers can be. Their son Glyn took ecstasy at a party. 3 days later, he was dead. With cases like that on file, the British authorities are increasingly unlikely to move towards the freer line taken by their Dutch counterparts.
There was a Senate hearing at the Capitol this morning about ecstasy, the new drug of choice among teens that has produced a 50% increase in emergency room visits here in the United States. Betty Ann Bowser reports.
It's become part of the scene. Dance parties called raves that attract hundreds of teenagers, some as young as 13. They go for the loud pounding beat of techno music. They go to socialize and let their inhibitions down. But the real worry is that an alarming number go to raves to find the new drug of choice, ecstasy. In just a few years, the drug has become hip among teenagers. One tablet at $20 to $70 a pop will produce a euphoric high that sometimes lasts over 6 hours. According to the Partnership for a Drug-Free America, the percent of teenagers that have tried ecstasy or use it recreationally doubled from 5% in 1995 to almost 10% in 2000. That makes it equal to teen usage of cocaine and LSD.
Ecstasy is sort of the emerging drug crisis that's confronting almost the entire country now.
Alan Leshner is the head of the National Institute on Drug Abuse.
This year, for the first time, we saw an actual spike, an increase in the use of ecstasy by 12th graders, by 10th graders, even by 8th graders, 13 and 14-year-old kids. So we're very concerned about it, and we think this is a public health crisis in the making.
Ecstasy, once used therapeutically by psychiatrists, later deemed illegal by the federal government, is a stimulant and hallucinogen that is produced in pill form illegally in Holland and Belgium. It's a chemical compound named MDMA. When taken, it causes the brain cells to release serotonin, the body's chief regulator of mood, giving the person a burst of energy and euphoria.
That's 3 months.
Joanna, a 16-year-old high school student who wanted to have her identity concealed, is a frequent user of ecstasy.
Well, it really intensifies your emotions and it makes everything seem like a much bigger deal. And so, like, being happy, you're being really happy. And then there's the whole skin thing where you just, like, everything that you touch feels really good. And it's just interesting to feel different things and, like, vibrations and soft stuff.
Some users call it the hug drug because it creates a desire to hug and touch, as this video from the federal government's Drug Enforcement Agency shows. Other users like to use glow sticks because of their brain's reaction to light and movement. Many kids on ecstasy use pacifiers and suckers to keep their teeth from grinding, a common side effect. Joanna acknowledges the drug has another downside.
It really does mess with your emotions and make you, like, more unstable. And the day after, I would usually cry.
There's a myth out there that ecstasy is a harmless, benign substance, and that's just false. The fact is that even in the short term, some people are extremely sensitive to its stimulant effects. They respond dramatically to the rise in body temperature that it can cause. It can affect your heart rate, etc. And then, of course, over time, it's now well established that it damages critical brain cells, cells that use the transmitter substance serotonin.
So far, there have only been short-term studies done on humans showing the effects on the brain and human body. Leshner says the current research does point to some permanent damage to the brain.
This shows you your brain after ecstasy. What we're measuring here is the ability of an individual's brain to use that chemical serotonin that you need for normal memory function, normal mood control. Bright is more, dull is less. What you see on top is a normal individual, and of course you can see bright, healthy serotonin binding. On the bottom, you see the brain of an ecstasy user 3 weeks after the individual stopped using ecstasy. Ecstasy actually injures the brain in ways that last long after you stop using it.
Dr. John Morgan, a professor of pharmacology at City University in New York, says more research is needed before any conclusions are drawn.
Every weekend in Europe and in the United States, millions of young people take it, spend an evening and recover without obvious harm. There's certain findings with ecstasy in the animal brain having to do with diminished serotonin transport. And in the animal brain at high doses, that's actually associated with some damage to the structure of the cell. It's entirely appropriate to try to find out if that occurs in humans. But what I think has happened heretofore is that with inconclusive research, people have decided, particularly the federal government, has decided it happens in humans, and they have to wage an all-out campaign.
In the last 2 years, there have been a string of deaths related to ecstasy. This boy who took ecstasy that night eventually went into a coma and died.
If they're in a hot setting, they can actually go into what are called febrile convulsions, the convulsions you have with a fever, and you can die from that. If your body temperature goes too high, obviously, you're going to die. We just don't know enough yet about what the literal causes of death are, but of course, if you think about it, it's all related to the drug.
Ecstasy also causes an overwhelming thirst. This 16-year-old Colorado girl died from water intoxication after drinking too much water after taking the drug for the first time. Authorities see evidence that use of the drug is spreading. Lieutenant Jim Smith of Colorado's Boulder County Drug Task Force says he believes the drug has moved from the rave scene to suburban basements.
It's pretty simple to say that's the only time people are going to see this drug is in a club. You know, so I keep my kid out of a club. I'm home free.
And that's not the case.
That is not the case at all. We have probably seen it more in a recreational environment, similar to marijuana or cocaine or any other drug, than a club environment.
The U.S. Customs Office seized 400,000 ecstasy pills in 1997. Turning up the heat on smugglers, Customs seized 9.5 million tablets in the year 2000. And halfway through this year, they've already seized more than 5 million tablets. Since ecstasy means big money for suppliers, the tablets only cost pennies to make, big suppliers are getting into the act. Charles Winwood is the acting commissioner of U.S. Customs.
There is a growing concern in the law enforcement community that, like heroin and cocaine and other forms of illegal substances that have a lot of crime and violence associated with them, we're beginning to see the same thing in the ecstasy trade.
Dealing ecstasy has become more dangerous. A 21-year-old dealer from outside of Washington, D.C. is one of many killed over ecstasy. Sammy the Bull Gravano, the hitman for the Gambino crime family, recently was connected to an ecstasy ring in Arizona.
Y'all ready?
Even those users who escape the violence are putting themselves at risk, since there are a lot of different drugs being marketed as ecstasy. A web page helps users identify what they have bought, but not all pills on the street have been tested. Teenagers like Joanna often feel safe with the pills they are buying because they think they know the source.
You just have to trust people and basically just get pills from people like I do, from somebody that I know and I trust.
She doesn't know who her friend buys from, or the 4 or 5 people that her friend buys from. Those people don't know the source of their pills.
Emmanuel Seferio started Dance Safe to protect kids like Joanna. The group informs teens about the drug's dangers and even tests pills so kids will know exactly what they are using.
We have been able to prevent thousands of young people from consuming tablets that they thought contained ecstasy, but in fact didn't. And many of these we know because there have been over 15 deaths in the United States in the last year alone from PMA, one of the many substitutes that are often found in ecstasy tablets on the market.
Authorities hope new measures will soon mean fewer kids will be getting high on ecstasy. Pressure is being put on club owners and rave sponsors to clean up their act. In some cities, pacifiers and glow sticks are now considered illegal drug paraphernalia. And the federal government has made the possession and sale of ecstasy 5 times more serious than heroin on a per-dose basis. Jail sentences have been tripled. Experts like Leshner continue to believe, as long as kids believe ecstasy is a safe drug, its popularity will continue to grow.
Okay, who's here? Bill? All right, thank you all for being here. That which you see before you are ecstasy tablets. They sell for between $25 and $30 per tablet on the open market. They're being used increasingly these days by young people in an effort to heighten their senses and their energy level at all-night dance marathons and at raves, which are events where deserted commercial warehouses are taken over for all-night parties. Ecstasy has now become a drug of choice for young people who frequent the club scene. Indeed, one of the defendants in this case at the time of his arrest had in his possession a list of over 50 clubs here in the New York metropolitan area that are frequented by young people with the locations and the telephone numbers. Ecstasy is illegal. It's a very, very dangerous drug. It stimulates the central nervous system. It produces hallucinogenic effects. It can cause nausea and chills and after effects such as depression, paranoia, and anxiety. Those who take ecstasy at raves and at dance marathons and at the clubs risk exhaustion and dehydration from a combination of the drug and the nonstop dancing that goes on. Today I'm joined by Special Agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration here in New York City, Lou Rice, by Police Commissioner Howard Safer, and by Colonel Bill DeBlock of the New York State Police. and many of their colleagues to announce that a multi-million-dollar international ecstasy distribution network operated by 6 Israeli nationals distributing some 50,000 or so ecstasy tablets each week here in the New York metropolitan area has been taken down with the arrest of the principals and dozens of their mid-level associates in New York and in Florida and Rhode Island and Pennsylvania. 300,000 ecstasy tablets worth of approximately $7.5 million retail and some $550,000 in cash have been seized, and some of that which was seized you see before you. The case started last April when investigators obtained information that an Israeli national, Oshri Amar, was selling large quantities of ecstasy in the New York metropolitan area. Based upon that and other information, we were able to obtain court authorization to install wiretaps on the telephone of Amar and his associates. During the course of the investigation, eavesdropping warrants were approved for some 35 telephones and pages. According to the charges, Amar and his associates engaged in hundreds of wholesale transactions with mid-level buyers and suppliers from California and Rhode Island, from Florida, from Boston, Philadelphia, and here in New York. They routinely obtain large quantities of ecstasy from the Netherlands and from Belgium. They directed shipments by courier of the drug to the United States, oftentimes coming through Germany and France. It's alleged that Amar conducted his business from his apartment here on Yellowstone Boulevard in Forest Hills, that he received orders from dozens of wholesale customers, made arrangements for the couriers to deliver the drugs to various locations throughout the city, where he would then direct the wholesale customers to pick up and pay for the drugs. Tremendous profits are made in dealing in ecstasy. The source people end up paying about $1 or $2 a tablet, and they charge their wholesalers $6 to $8 a tablet, and thus, for example, in a shipment of 200,000 tablets, the profit at the wholesale level would be over $1 million. At the retail level, the profit can be as much as $22 a tablet. Earlier in the investigation, 13 low-level persons were arrested and prosecuted. 10 have already been convicted and have been sentenced to jail over the last few weeks. An additional 5 persons were taken into custody, and today another 32 individuals were taken into custody or are being sought for prosecution here in New York by my office. In addition to those whom we will prosecute here in Queens, 21 individuals are under arrest and 3 people are being sought up in Providence, Rhode Island, by local police and the Drug Enforcement Task Force up in that city as part of this investigation. The individuals will be prosecuted up there by the Rhode Island Attorney General's office. Let me just say this is a very significant case. A major drug distribution network has been put out of business, and a very dangerous drug has been removed from circulation and is now out of the hands of our young people. I want to pay a particular tribute before I turn these microphones over to my colleagues, to Detective George Rapetti and Special Agent Mike Mokoff of the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force, to Sergeant Josh Genn and Detective Joe Fezer of my office's NYPD Detective Squad, which is headed by Captain Harry Noor, and of course to my case assistants, Jen Friedman and Brett Harvey of our Rackets Bureau under the leadership of our Bureau Chief Brian Mitch. We also had a lot of cooperation from law enforcement all over this country and internationally as well. The Israeli National Police, the Dutch Police, the Providence, Rhode Island Police Department, and the DEA task forces, and Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and a lot of others as well. Everyone did a really great job, and we are very, very much in their debt. Having said all of that, let me introduce first of all Lou Rice, who is the special agent in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration here in New York City. Louis, where are you? The next one, good.
I'd just like to briefly thank Judge Brown, the members of the Queens District Attorney Squad, New York City Police Department, New York State Police, and the members of the Drug Enforcement Administration that make up the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force. A little background on the drug, MDMA, also known as ecstasy. It's produced primarily in the Benelux region of Europe, which is Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg. It's smuggled into the United States in false luggage, furniture, and utilization of the express services. Overseas, the price is from 50 cents to $2 a tablet at the wholesale level. Once it gets to the United States, that price increases from about $6.50 to $8 at the wholesale level. But the dramatic price jump is in the clubs, where a pill will cost anywhere from $25 to $30. Typical night of use for a teenager that thinks they're having a good time or some fun will be the ingestion of 1 or 2 tablets, 8 to 15 hours of intense dancing, total dehydration, which will cause their body to shut down, requiring significant amounts of sleep. The message that we'd like to get out here today collectively, that this is a drug that young people should stay away from. It's not an ecstasy, it is a nightmare, and we're trying to prevent young kids on the illusion of using drugs and really destroying their lives. Thank you.
Howard.
Thanks, Judge. This is a very significant case. Over the last year, the NYPD has seized over 2 million doses of ecstasy, MDMA, in various places, including many doses that were seized at the airport. This case is a perfect example of the way that drug law enforcement is supposed to work. Federal, state, and local officials all working together with host country officials in foreign countries to bring down what is probably the most significant organization in the sale of this drug that we've encountered so far. Although we're certainly not declaring victory, we believe that this will significantly impact on the sale of this drug, not only in the New York area, but in many other states throughout the country.
Bill?
There's not much I can say that hasn't already been said, but once again, I'll echo the fact that this is a significant case. It's not often that you get to take a case all the way back to its source, particularly in a foreign country, which has been done here. We see this stuff all over upstate as well. And once again, I don't think that kids realize how dangerous that this stuff is. That's why it's particularly gratifying to be able to remove an organization like this and this quantity of product from distribution. I would like to congratulate Judge Brown and his staff, Commissioner Howard Safer, Lou Rice, and all the men and women of the Drug Task Force for being able to put together such a significant case.
Thanks, Bill. Folks, have any questions?
Yes, is this the largest bust that you've made in ecstasy
Louis?
in New York?
You probably know better than I do.
It's the largest recently. I'd say that the decade of the 90s we seized collectively less than 1,000 pills, and last year, as the commissioner stated, law enforcement collectively seized over 2 million pills of ecstasy. So yeah, this is the largest to date for the year 2000.
I think the thing that troubles me the most is the fact that we're seeing a resurgence in the use of ecstasy. It was around in the mid-'80s and not in the kinds of quantity that you see today. And now suddenly, here as we go into the year 2000, I mean, we just see a proliferation of ecstasy just about in every single club. We see these raves that are being held on weekends where they take over a deserted warehouse and go nonstop for 16, 18, 24 hours. And of course, these pills give these kids the ability to do that because it heightens their senses. But at some point along the line, they begin to dehydrate, and the next thing you know, they're in trouble physically. As a matter of fact, in some of the clubs, they shut off all of the water supply in the clubs selling bottled water for $5 to $7 a bottle, so that the kids who desperately need the water during the course of the evening end up having to pay for it. And they don't even need a liquor license. They don't even need to sell liquor because the water does the trick.
How did you get the first tip?
We had information in the in about last April or so that this young feller, Oshri Omar, here on Yellowstone Boulevard in Forest Hills, was moving ecstasy in and around the clubs, and had a group of distributors out there. And predicated upon that information and other information that we acquired, we were able to go up on a number of wires, and the investigation lasted about 10 months. And as I indicated before, we've made a number of arrests along the line, but today we've really taken down virtually everybody that's involved.
Can you get more specific on that?
No, I'm afraid not.
Do the Israelis seem to dominate this market, the ecstasy?
Really? You know, come on, you're the expert more than I am.
This investigation obviously involved the Israelis, and there are other investigations involving the Israelis, but I'm very quick not to single out any ethnic group or racial group involving drug trafficking. I think the common denominator for drug traffickers are greed. And you can see the markup overseas from 50 cents to $2 a tablet to a sale in the club in New York City at $25 to $30 a pill, and the money that was seized in this investigation. The markup and the predominantly common factor for drug traffickers is greed.
I think also it's worth mentioning or re-mentioning something that I think Lou mentioned before. Behind Major Harney over there is a suitcase that has a false bottom in it, and it's the kind of thing that couriers end up using, and then they'll take quantities of these drugs. I'm told that you can get as many as 200,000 pills into the false bottom of a suitcase like that, and they end up moving through the airports, coming in with through couriers, and oftentimes members of the network will babysit a courier to make certain of the fact that the drugs don't find themselves disappearing in the process. Then they move them out to hotels and other locations around town where the distributors meet, pay the money, take the product with them.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks for all of you being here. Okay, Charlie. Big in the morning. Sure. Okay. And also, like to get okay. All right.
I'd like to bring it over to the table.
Okay. Just in case.
That's cute, Jack.
Okay. We got what they need. Thank you. Take care. Great taste.
You rolling? Yeah.
Hey, you know, we were talking about your buddy there, Conrad Williams. We owe him now, because we found out that the guy never left us. Our reporter was in there. He never left. So we were talking about, well, we owe when he comes to New York. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear it. You just. I'll say it again. Probably never see it.
Try a what?
Well, you're gonna get a load of you know what I mean? Okay.
Where's Josh? Where's Josh?
We're also here to talk about ecstasy. Why do you think the increase in ecstasy this year?
It's difficult to tell why there's an increase. Clearly, this is focused on fairly affluent young people, 18 to 24 years of age. There's a market that has grown out of the clubs. So there's money to be made. And where there's a demand, people will supply the drug.
And as far as demand goes, how are you seeing it coming through here? Is it possible to turn the ringers down just so we don't... Turn the ringers down just in case.
We've seen a significant increase. We had the seizures last year of about 400,000 doses. That's for the entire year. This year, we're up to over 1 million seizures, and of course, we're not even through half a year. So that's as I say, significant increase. It concerns us. We think there's increased demand here. I think young people are at risk, particularly the 18 to 24 years of age group of fairly affluent young people.
What are you looking for when you're tracking down this particular drug?
Well, the inspectors that work for Customs do a very good job. They're pretty sophisticated in spotting people who are bringing drugs into the country. Now, these drugs have come in, for the most part, in hand luggage or carried on the person of individuals in the air passenger environment.
And what makes you look for a particular person, as far as, you picking out a suitcase, or what kind of things are you looking for in the individual?
We don't want to give away all our trade secrets here, but it takes a lot of training and a lot of sophistication on the part of the inspectors to spot people who are bringing drugs into the country. It's a challenge, no question about it, and it's becoming more difficult.
To what extent do you think that, as you say, you just said a few minutes ago, that it's already 3 times the amount of last year's fiscal year? To what extent do you think that's, perhaps it's always been coming through and it's just that Customs are doing a better job, or is it, do you think, increased demand?
I think Customs is doing a good job, but generally speaking, we have estimates that say that we seize about 17 to 25% of drugs coming into the country. So if our seizures go up, it's reasonably safe to assume that the amount of drugs coming into the country is also going up.
And where do you think these drugs are coming from?
Well, these drugs are coming predominantly from Europe, from the Netherlands, from Belgium. They're going right now to East Coast cities, to New York, Miami, some to Detroit.
And are they expensive, or what kind of market value do they have?
They're certainly not expensive to make. It costs between 1 and 2 cents to make one dose, and that's sold for about 70 cents to $1 on the wholesale market, and about $25 to $40 in the U.S. In generally speaking, in the club scene.
And are they difficult to make, these drugs?
It takes a fairly high level of sophistication to make them. It doesn't take a lot of room, but it takes someone, generally speaking, with a background in chemistry to make the drugs. They're, in essence, professionally made.
So I understand that Interpol has set up a special desk to deal with ecstasy specifically. Why is that?
There's increased concern in Interpol because this is becoming, of course, a worldwide problem, focused right now predominantly in Europe, with the U.S. being the major market. So Interpol is really a gatherer of information as far as the drug trade is concerned.
And how long has this special desk been in operation?
The special desk just started this year in Interpol. I'm on the executive committee of Interpol. We have our meeting coming up this month, and this is one of the topics that we're going to discuss.
What do the seizures, the increased number of seizures, suggest to you as far as... Well, first of all, what do they suggest to you?
The increased seizures suggest increased demand in this country, and therefore increased the flow of ecstasy primarily from Europe into the United States.
And as far as organized versus random crime, I mean, what kind of organization is going into getting these drugs into the country?
For the most part, this is a product of organized crime, an organized approach to crime. It may not be traditional organized crime as we knew it, say, years ago, but it is organized in the sense that you need a distribution chain to distribute it here in this country.
And that would compare with what, a few years ago?
Well, most drugs are distributed through an organized approach. So it compares to a certain extent with heroin and cocaine. Obviously, they've been here for a much longer period of time. Those organizations are probably more entrenched here, better established here, but this also involves organized crime.
But I guess what I'm trying to say is ecstasy coming into this country 5 years ago, how did it, I mean, how come, is it to do with awareness of the drug, or, I mean, what makes it different now to 5 years ago?
5 years ago, really, we didn't hear of ecstasy in this country. It's kind of a stealth drug. All of a sudden, it's upon us in the last few years. It's been produced in Europe for about the last 10 years, but it really hasn't come into the United States in any great quantities up until the last 2 or 3 years. And again, as we see, this year, the increase is dramatic.
And what is the market? What kind of people are going out for this drug?
The market for this drug is young, suburban, fairly affluent people, 18 to 24-year-old age group. It is used in clubs. We see that with great frequency. It's been referenced to in a few recent movies. So it seems to be right now at least its height of its recent popularity.
I'm just going to ask you one more about sort of, the increase in the amount of ecstasy that you've been seizing. And if you don't mind, just the amount of ecstasy that you've been seizing.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind just answering it using ecstasy as opposed to this drug or drugs.
Right.
So yes, why do you think the increase in demand for ecstasy well, first of all, what level of increase have you seen of ecstasy?
We see a dramatic increase in the seizure of ecstasy because clearly there is an increased demand in this country. And last year we seized a little under 400,000 doses. That's through the entire year. This year we've seized over 1 million doses of ecstasy, and of course we have several months to go.
I think that's it. I think that's fine.
Okay. Talk about getting my son Gregory a job with ABC, who wants to be an on-the-air person, but he's a Marine Corps pilot now. He's doing other things.
But I don't. Okay. think. I don't know, what were you doing this weekend? Where were you this weekend? Were you in New York or in DC?
No, I was in Washington and had to do some basic office work in Washington.
You good?
You were?
Yeah, I went to the IEC. I spoke at the I was telling myself, actually, I was here, Kelly. Going more, but I only been for a couple days each time. Where we need Bill.
No.
He's the chairman of the teacher
I've lived as a teacher, so I didn't like it, so I hope I'm doing the right thing, because it's definitely going back, and it's definitely
quickly. I mean, even when I get back to meetings, get upset. I can't find a remote for television.
I know, it's true.